generally speaking, we're the ones you probably can trust a little bit more than some egg-shaped oval on Twitter. Welcome everyone to the Monday edition of Fair Territory, the last Monday Fair Territory before the winter meetings, and the action already has commenced. We were expecting after Thanksgiving some deals to start trickling in, and we saw two just in the last 24 hours as I tape this on Monday morning. The two deals are Frankie Montas to the Mets, 2 years, $34 million with a 1-year opt-out, and Matthew Boyd to the Cubs, 2 years, $29 million. Now, the interesting thing about these deals is both these players are represented by Scott Boras. And Scott Boras, after an offseason last year in which 4 players did not sign until after February 25th, is clearly taking guys off the board this year if he gets the right offers. Now, maybe last year he wasn't getting the right offers for certain people. We can debate this all day long, whether he was asking too much or whether it was the teams that were the problem. But this is clearly a more accelerated pace than we saw last season from Boras. And I'm going to show you right now what I'm talking about. Here are 5 Scott Boras agreements, some are official, some not, that have already taken place, and it's December 2nd as we sit here today. Nick Martinez, 1 year, $21.05 million. He accepted the qualifying offer. Yusei Kikuchi, 3 years, $63 million. Blake Snell, 5 years, $182 million. Frankie Montas, as I mentioned, 2 for $34, and Boyd, as I mentioned, 2 for $29. So what does this mean for the teams involved? Well, the Mets desperately need starting pitching. Remember, they have 3 starting pitchers who are now free agents: Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, and Jose Quintana. That has left gaping holes in their rotation, a little fact that has gotten lost in the pursuit of Juan Soto, at least among fans and certain members of the media. They've forgotten, oh yeah, the Mets need to rebuild their entire rotation. So let's take a look at how it will be now that Montas is in the fold, pending a physical. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting there. Senga, of course, will be at the top, but had an injury-marred season. Montas, the Mets are counting on a bounce back similar to what they saw from Manaea and Severino. These short-term deals worked beautifully for them last year. We'll see if they continue to work. Left-hander David Peterson, I expect he will be in the rotation. Tyler McGill, maybe, but clearly the Mets need more. And I assume, regardless of whether they get Soto, that they will pursue more. If you get Juan Soto, you keep going. You don't just stop. So that is the Montas situation with the Mets. With the Cubs and Boyd, it's a little bit different. Montas was kind of a guy that the Yankees took a chance on a couple of years ago at the deadline, and he didn't pitch well, got hurt, and then sort of rebuilt his value last year. It wasn't great, but the Mets think they can get more out of him. With Boyd, he was coming off Tommy John surgery, did not join the Guardians last season until mid-August, and yet in those final 8 starts, 2.72 ERA. The Cubs, I named their ownership Dorks of the Week last week because they are not spending big, or at least they have signaled they're not going to spend big. This deal does not qualify as spending big, but it certainly should help their rotation. Let's take a look at what the Cubs rotation looks like. It's a lot more complete than the Mets as of this moment. At the top, we've got Shota Imanaga, Cy Young candidate last year. Justin Steele, when healthy, one of the better pitchers in the game. Jameson Taillon, and then you see Matthew Boyd and Javier Assad. That's a pretty good group. They need to fix their bullpen. They need a little bit more offense. I don't know exactly how they're going to find it. But this is a team that, again, is capable of doing big things in the NL Central. They just need more. For more on these signings, check out Northside Territory and Metsed Up on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Don't miss a single episode from the Foul Territory Network. So those are the 2 signings to start the week. And in my column today on The Athletic, I wrote about the Juan Soto Dominos, the other free agents that are going to fall, but only after Soto picks his next team. You often hear about free agents holding up the market, and sometimes that talk is real, sometimes it's kind of overstated. In this case, it's true. We're not that far along where people are complaining, but Soto, his contract will determine so much. The impact will be so vast and far-reaching. I want to take you through it and show you what I mean. Let's start with the outfielders. This is the obvious place to start. Once Juan Soto signs, then Teoscar Hernandez and Anthony Santander can get better clarity on where they might go. Teoscar Hernandez still looks like he's going back to the Dodgers, but the Dodgers are hanging around for Juan Soto, seeing if maybe he falls to them. Not going to happen, but there's no harm in them trying and waiting. Anthony Santander, once Soto is off the board and once Teoscar presumably returns to the Dodgers, he's going to have his pick of not only the Soto losers, many of whom or some of whom will be involved in his bidding, but also other teams. And Hernandez, too, has drawn interest from other teams outside of the five that we know are interested in Soto: the Yankees, Mets, Red Sox, Dodgers, and Blue Jays. So Santander should do rather well, but at the same time, he's got to wait. In the infield, it's sort of the same thing. The two premier free agent infielders are Willy Adames, the shortstop from the Milwaukee Brewers, and Alex Bregman, the third baseman from the Houston Astros. These two guys could be fits for both the Yankees and Red Sox if neither of those teams sign Soto, because those teams have needs in the infield as well. They also have other options, just as Hernandez and Santander do. The Astros, of course, are continuing to pursue Bregman. The Giants are a possible fit for Adames. There are other teams in the mix, I am sure, as well. And then you look at the starting pitching market and you say, well, how can Juan Soto affect the starting pitching market? Because the teams that do not sign Juan Soto, they're going to have money to burn. Maybe it's money they spend on a Corbin Burns or a Max Fried. Maybe they do something else entirely, but those teams, where do you always begin when you're trying to construct the best possible roster? You begin with the rotation. So let's say, for example, the Red Sox strike out on Soto. Well, they can sign Burns or Fried, and they can maybe do one of the outfielders as well. They can do a lot of things. The Blue Jays are an even better example because no one considers them that serious a threat in the Soto sweepstakes. The Blue Jays a few years back went after Garrett Cole, didn't get him, but wound up with another Scott Boras client, Hyunjin Ryu. Well, it could be the same kind of script developing in Toronto. Yes, the Blue Jays want Soto. They're going to try for Soto. But if they don't get him, well, there's another Scott Boras client who would fit Corbin Burns, or maybe it's someone else entirely. They can go in other directions. But the point is, none of these scenarios that I'm discussing will begin to take shape, begin to become reality until after Soto signs and these players, these different free agents, can explore their markets more fully. Right now, they're all on hold. The good news is everyone in the sport expects the Soto resolution to come either shortly before the winter meetings or during the winter meetings. My guess is Scott Boras wants to put on a show in Dallas and have Soto signed there. But we'll see. These things can go in any number of directions. But again, once Soto signs, then the true action is going to begin. Time now for the Inside Dish, the part of the show where I go inside a story I've written, maybe inside a trend in the game, or maybe I take a stroll down memory lane. And that's actually what I want to do this week. And the reason why I am taking this stroll is because the winter meetings are returning to a hotel in Dallas known as the Anatole. Originally, or some time back, it was the Wyndham Anatole, then it was the Lowe's Anatole, now it's the Hilton Anatole, whatever. When the winter meetings are in this hotel, crazy things happen. And that's why I'm looking forward to this year, because I expect some crazy things to happen. And the Soto deal, of course, ranks as the biggest, likeliest candidate to be one of those crazy big things. 2000 winter meetings. Now, I go back a long way in this sport, but let's go back 24 years to the 2000 winter meetings. That was the winter meetings in which A-Rod signed his $252 million deal with the Texas Rangers. Now, you might remember, those of you who are a certain age, the build-up, the lead-up to those winter meetings when A-Rod was interested in the Mets, but Steve Phillips, the Mets GM, came out and said, no, he's asking for a private office, he's asking for this and that, his own PR staff. We're not going to do a 24+1 arrangement. So the Mets were out. Then A-Rod said somewhere that the fences at then Safeco Field were kind of too far back, and the Mariners replied, we're not moving in the fences. So there was as much talk about A-Rod then as there is about Juan Soto now. He was the hot guy, the 25-year-old free agent. Very similar circumstances. Of course, there was no social media then, but this was the talk of the sport. And those winter meetings turned into a spending orgy that I don't know has been really matched in terms of intensity. More dollars have been spent in winter meetings. The one where Cole, Rendon, and Strasburg went down a few years back, there were more dollars spent. But that winter meetings was a lively, rollicking affair. And it started with the signing of Mike Hampton, the Rockies signing of Mike Hampton to an 8-year, $121 million deal. At the moment that was signed, that was the richest deal in baseball history. And one of the things Hampton said in explaining his decision to choose the Rockies was that he liked the school system where he was going to put his kids. Sandy Alderson at that time was an executive vice president in Major League Baseball. He, in the middle of the lobby at the meetings, ripped the Rockies for spending that kind of money, and he ripped Hampton for saying what he said about the school system. He said, Sandy Alderson did, I don't want to hear about the Wheat Ridge, Colorado school system. So that is how the winter meetings that year started. Then came A-Rod. And of course, the rumors were flying all over the place. And I'll never forget, Frank Wren, then an assistant general manager with the Atlanta Braves, he later became the GM. I saw him ducking into an elevator. And this was right before the announcement. And I asked, have you heard anything on A-Rod? The Braves were in at that point. And he looked at me and he said, 10 times 24. I couldn't believe it. What he meant was 10 years, $240 million. As it turned out, the deal was a little bit north of that with the Texas Rangers. 10 years, $252 million. And even at that point, even after A-Rod agreed, it wasn't over in Dallas. Manny Ramirez was next. And Manny at the time was with the Cleveland then Indians. And he was a free agent. And he was, of course, in demand because at the time he was one of the great hitters in the game. I remember calling John Hart, then the president of baseball operations, general manager, whatever it was, with the Guardians, in his hotel room the night before this all went down. I said, John, are you in on Manny? Oh, Ken, not at these numbers. They've gotten so out of hand. We can't possibly afford Manny Ramirez. Well, that was not true. And I don't mind saying that now that John is no longer in baseball. That was an outright fabrication. The Indians were in. They were in big. But they got outbid by the Boston Red Sox. Manny Ramirez went there for 8 years, $160 million, and the rest is history. So that winter meetings, a lot of action, a lot of back and forth with Alderson kind of serving as Major League Baseball's, I don't know, complainer in chief at that point. It was a lot of fun. It was winter meetings that I will never forget. Now, the next one that was very memorable was 2011. Albert Pujols to the Angels. Now, if you guys remember, and you don't have to be of a certain age for this one, if you remember, Albert Pujols was a subject of attention from the Cardinals, and the Marlins were in big as well. It was the Cardinals and the Marlins and the Cardinals. You really didn't hear much about other teams. And I'll never forget, one of the better scoops of my career was when I found out the Angels were talking to Pujols, just talking to him. They were in at that point. And I remember the Angels PR staff reacting, saying we don't know anything about it. I remember other reporters, knocking down that report. Well, of course, it turned out that Pujols indeed went to the Angels. It was an absolute shocker. The Angels at that same winter meeting signed C.J. Wilson. It wasn't the same kind of meetings as we saw in 2000. Wasn't quite that lively, but it was pretty good. And the Pujols deal to me stands as an enduring example of what I often talk about on this show and others, what I often write about as well. In free agency and to a certain extent at the trade deadline, things are going to happen that no one anticipates. That will make your head spin. Now, actually, you can look at Matthew Boyd and Frankie Montas. Those deals weren't exactly predicted for those teams, but I'm talking about the bigger deals. I'm talking about when Albert Pujols went to the Angels, when Zach Greinke went to the Diamondbacks a few years later. Those are the ones that come out of nowhere that captivate us the most. So, is it possible that happens with Juan Soto? Doesn't seem that way, but you never know. And I will tell you this, at the Anatole, things shake, things start moving, things happen. Time now for Grillin Ken. Let's get to your questions. First question comes from Coach Mike Faber, who asks, how can we tell a real report from a fake one these days? My heart can't take it, LOL. Mike, good question. Now, people on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, should by this point be pretty savvy to how the thing works. There are reporters, established reporters who work for major outlets who report on baseball transactions. There are reporters who, over the years, have built a certain reputation that you can trust. Not everybody's perfect, and certain reporters, including myself, will miss from time to time. But generally speaking, the accuracy rate is pretty high. And then there are others that surface on X that will report things, and you know that you've never heard of them, and you wonder, well, can this possibly be real? Now, I will give this qualifier. There are times when fans or random people in general find out things before we do and post them and then claim credit and want to be a reporter for a day. It happens. That's fine. Good for them. But generally speaking, I would wait for the confirmation from the established reporters, the guys like Jeff Passan, John Heyman, Joel Sherman, Mark Feinsand, myself. We do this for a living. All of the athletic writers I would mention as well. And generally speaking, we're the ones you probably can trust a little bit more than some egg-shaped oval on Twitter. Put it that way. All right, next question comes from Jeremy Bonsal. Jeremy says, why are other teams not following the lead of the Dodgers with the deferring payment to maximize their chances? Actually, Jeremy, teams other than the Dodgers also do deferrals. Maybe not to the same extent that the Dodgers have done, and maybe not with the same impact, because the Dodgers have done them with big deals, and they've done them to essentially lower the luxury tax number on those deals. But they are not alone in this regard. The real question to me is, will teams now, seeing what the Dodgers are doing, become more aggressive with deferrals, try to employ that strategy more often? It works best for teams that are near the luxury tax threshold, the teams that want to lower the AAVs of the multi-year deals that they sign and thus get lower present day values and lower luxury tax numbers. If you're, say, the Guardians or the Orioles or the Mariners, one of those teams, deferrals might work in terms of enabling you to pay later, and you can invest the money now that you're putting in escrow to satisfy Major League Baseball, but it's not the same motivation as it is for the big market teams and the spenders that want to get under the luxury tax threshold or at least lower their number. All right, time for the final question. This one comes from Winston Babb, who asks, what are the Astros doing? Well, I wrote about this today a little bit, Winston. The Astros' main focus right now is Bregman. But if they don't get Bregman, they have stayed in contact with Willy Adames, and they also have looked at Jorge Polanco. Now, what's interesting about the Astros is that if they don't sign Bregman, what makes anyone think they're going to spend for Willy Adames? If you're going to spend that kind of money, the money it will take for Bregman, the money it will take for Adames, you're going to do it on the face of the franchise, or one of the faces of the franchise, and that's Bregman. So why would you do it for Willy Adames? And the Athletics' Chandler Rome pointed out a few weeks ago, the same applies to Nolan Arenado, who is available in trade. Why would the Astros bring in Arenado, pay him, although the commitment would not be as great as it would be to Bregman, when you've got a face of the franchise sitting there and he is the guy that you really want? So that's their main focus right now. They also, at some point, I would expect, would address first base. And the other thing that could surface with them is a trade of Ryan Presley. Heard about that earlier in the offseason. Certainly something that seems possible. I want to thank everyone for their questions. Thanks for watching, for listening. You know where to find us. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back on Thursday with our live show. It will be at noon on Thursday. Myself and Alana Rizzo. Have a great week, everyone. The action has just begun.
Let's thank our friends at BetMGM. Let's shout them out. BetMGM First Bet, $1,500 offer when you use the bonus code FOUL. Get this offer when you download the BetMGM Sportsbook app or at BetMGM.com. Sign up, enter that bonus code FOUL, and deposit at least $10 into your new account. Place your first wager, receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. If it does lose, your bonus bets will be available once your initial wager is settled. A gambling problem or concern? There's help. Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Fair Territory airs each week, and we'd love for you to become part of our community. Here's another video you might enjoy. See you next time.